Hello Camilla. In this video I'm going to give you feedback on your summary from last week. So we'll just dive straight into it. First of all, could you please work on Google Classroom instead of uploading a document? Remember we said that? Instead of a Word document, just use a Google Doc. It's easier for me to give feedback that way because I can leave comments straight away without having to download it and go through all these other steps. Okay, just looking at your notes, you've taken some good notes and I can see how your summary actually follows the structure. So it's really a good idea to start with good notes and know the structure of your summary in advance before you even start writing it. So that's a good thing you did. Try to stay within the word limit, right? Remember 200 words? It shouldn't be that difficult to reduce the word count. So, okay, let's try and see what you've done in this summary. First sentence, in the video, the speaker claims that implicit bias is the need to be recognized in order to eliminate the wrong attitude to differences in people and attitude to matter. You tried an argumentative first sentence, claims that, which is a good idea. You included the name of the video, the name of the speaker, the title of the video. Oh, very good. I'm just not clear what this means though. Implicit bias is the need to be recognized. In order, do you mean to say that we need to recognize our implicit biases? It sounds like you're defining an implicit bias as a person's need to be recognized. So you're probably trying to say here, we need to recognize implicit biases in order to eliminate our wrong attitude to differences in people. And here you probably don't need this because it gets very wordy. Remember, if you look at the rubric, and it's always a good idea to start with the rubric, you'll see that the first sentence needs to be argumentative but also concise. So it's a little bit wordy here. You can just say that David Hockett claims that implicit biases need to be recognized, or we need to recognize them and take the necessary steps to avoid them, or something like that. Because remember, he also gave recommendations, and you should include that. The first sentence should include the recommendations, I think, because that's a very important part of the video. So make it less wordy, plus add something about recommendations. Okay. He examines the consideration of the implicit bias. I'm not sure that you even need this sentence. What's the consideration of the implicit bias? I cannot tell what you're trying to say here. He examines the consideration of the implicit bias. Hockett notes that the racism is one of the main problems of his country, and implicit bias can help recognize the secrecy. Okay. I think you're trying to introduce the topic here, which is a good idea. You can very briefly say that we do need to recognize our biases, and sometimes they can result in hurtful behavior or something like that. So just very briefly, in one sentence, very brief sentence, say that they may have a negative impact, our biases, on other people. And that's it, but you have to say it clearly, because right now I'm not sure. I recognize some keywords here, and these are important keywords, but it's a bit unclear. What do you mean when you say he examines the consideration of the implicit bias? And then, okay, it's one of the main problems of his country, that's clear, but implicit bias can help to recognize the secrecy. I'm not sure what that means. Which secrecy? Secrecy is a very specific word. Secrecy, we use it as, I don't know, in spy novels, they try to be secretive. Secrecy. Yeah, I'm not very sure. Maybe you're looking this is a synonym for something. Maybe they're hidden. That's what you're trying to say. Biases are hidden. Anyways, you can express all of this very briefly in one sentence. You can say these are hidden prejudices which often result in hurtful behavior towards others, or something like that. And then you've introduced the topic of biases, right? So coming after your first sentence, that's a good idea to introduce biases. But again, try to make it brief. Okay. Then he examines the characteristics of implicit bias that has 3 varieties. Indeed, he does that. Half of the video is basically him talking about the 3 characteristics. Here, that has 3 varieties. It's not so much that it has 3 varieties, it's 3 characteristics, and you can say that. He goes on to discuss the 3 main characteristics of implicit biases. Okay? And then now we're going to talk about them. Subconscious level is the first characteristic, comma. The second is running contrary to conscious stated beliefs about the identification as a human being and defining the values, comma. The third are mental associations that people make between people, objects, and etc. Okay. So in one big sentence, you have tried to combine all 3. Sometimes you can do that, but I would recommend just splitting all of this into 3 shorter and more clear sentences. First of all, this doesn't work grammatically. Commas, you cannot simply link clauses like that, independent clauses with a comma. You simply cannot do that. Grammatically, it doesn't work. So we call this, sorry, a comma splice. If you want to, you can use full stops or semicolons. That will work. But of course, if you just do that, it'll be a very short sentence, right? Subconscious level is the first characteristic. Okay? We need to expand a little bit on this. So I would recommend split it into 3 separate sentences and expand each one a bit. The first characteristic is that they are subconscious and blah, 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 right? Say something about that. Full stop or semicolon. The second is running contrary to conscious stated beliefs about the identification as a human being and defining the values. Here, it's actually quite unclear, so I would say rephrase this. He did say that they sometimes run counter to our stated beliefs. Okay. That's fine, but about the identification as a human being and defining values, it makes this phrase in particular, the identification, until the end of the sentence, it makes it unclear. So you want to say it more simply with your own words that we're talking about beliefs which sometimes even run counter to our own stated conscious beliefs. Again, semicolon or better full stop. The third are mental associations that people make between people, objects, and etc. Generally, we don't end an academic sentence with and etc. Sounds a bit informal. So in academic language, we always try to be very precise. So and etc. is not precise. The third are mental associations that people make between people, objects. Okay, I see. Here, when you were talking about varieties, that kind of forced you to construct your sentence in this way. He's not so much talking about varieties of implicit bias, but more about characteristics of biases. First, they're subconscious. Second, they run counter to our stated beliefs. And third, they are very quick. I think he was talking about how quick they are. So here you need to tidy this up a little bit as you discuss the three main characteristics. Now let's go back to your notes. See what you have there. Three characteristics: subconscious level, run contrary to, triggered through rapid. You see how beautifully you've said that here. I mean, you just use those notes. This is so much clearer, right? He's talking about three characteristics and it's very clear what these are. So stick with that. There is a reason why I made those good notes. I mean, the notes you took are very good. So use those in your summary, because right now, from those clear notes to this rather unclear sentence, you see I'm not sure what happened, right? So tidy this up, use your notes, use three separate shorter sentences. That's much better than trying complex, compound, academic sounding sentences, which basically you can get so tangled up in those. It's just be clear, and that's better than having those long sentences. Okay, but I get what you're doing though. Structurally it works, right? After the introduction, after the first main idea, you're discussing the characteristics, which is good. That's what he does in the video. Now here it was a kind of a sort of a game he was playing with the audience. You do not really need that as a supporting idea, because it just supports, it's an example of he supports his idea that we make these quick associations, and he does that with a game. So remember, we stay away from examples. We don't really need this to mention this game. And the other thing is, imagine somebody hasn't seen the video and reads this summary. They will not know what you're talking about. The speaker asked the audience to give association to show their prejudices. We're not exactly sure what the game was, so there's no need to mention that game, right? It's just an example of something that you already mentioned. You did mention the supporting idea. That's all you need to do. These are quick associations. Remember, you said that in your notes here, right? Triggered through rapid and automatic mental association. There we go. So far, you have basically discussed the three main characteristics. Another point is that there are reasons of importance to focus on implicit bias. There are reasons of importance. Sounds a little bit vague. What do you mean, reasons of importance? You mean that we need to be aware or analyze our own biases for several reasons? Maybe you could put it that way. I think it's much safer to just say that they are recommendations he gives. He basically recommends what we need to do. So the speaker gives three recommendations, and then you can enumerate first, second, third. What we need to do: we need to be predictive and preventive, we need to diagnose the problem, and so on. And again, it's better to do that in three separate sentences rather than this very long sentence, which will be hard to read. I think a good idea is to read out loud to yourself and to try and see whether it would be clear to somebody who hasn't seen the video. Just read out loud your own writing and you will see that shorter sentences will work better here, right? So split this into three and make it a bit clearer. To conclude, the implicit bias is an important aspect of the healthy relationships between people and a proper attitude to things. I think that's stated a bit vaguely. Again, you can use more precise language.